everyone, good evening. In some time from now, the tariffs kick in. How is India ready? That is the question that I'll try and decode with Geeta Mohan and our team of reporters in the next 1 hour. The headlines we are tracking. India braces for 50% US tariff from tomorrow. All eyes on exports impact. Government measures. Prime Minister Narendra Modi chairs key meet on tariff counter strategy. Massive cloudburst in Jammu's Doda. 6 killed in Vaishno Devi landslide. Tawi bridge crumbles. Houses and cars swept away. Chief Minister chairs huddle. Rescue operations are underway. And flash floods leave trail of destruction in Himachal Pradesh. Manali-Leh road is blocked. It's judges versus judges over Amit Shah's Salwa Judum Bab at opposition's vice presidential pick. 5 judges released letter, call it bid to cloak political partisanship under language of judicial independence. Defence Minister Rajnath Singh commissions 2 advanced stealth frigates, INS Udaygiri and INS Himgiri, describing it a major step towards India's self-reliance in defence manufacturing. India is bracing for 50% tariffs on its goods exported to the United States, with the Donald Trump administration notifying 25% additional tariff rate for India effective August 27, 2025, which will be 12:01 EST, which is 9:30 a.m. Indian Standard Time. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security has published a draft order saying that 25% additional tariff would apply on Indian goods entered for consumption or withdrawn from warehouse for consumption or after 12:01 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time on August 27, 2025. The tariffs, which are essentially 25% plus 25%, are a result of the ongoing trade deal stalemate between India and the US and America's accusations that India's crude oil trade with Russia is indirectly, in fact, financing the war against Ukraine. India has drawn its red lines for the trade deal and has also made it clear that its energy security is important, thereby refusing to let the US dictate its crude purchase. How will this 50% US tariffs impact the Indian economy and its exports? That's the question that I'll decode in the next 1 hour. But first up, let's listen in to what Prime Minister Modi said. He has said it clearly that it is the time and opportunity for India now to focus on self-reliance.
मैं गांधी की धरती पे से बोल रहा हूं। मेरे देश के लघु उद्यमी हो, किसान हो, पशुपालक हो, हर किसी के लिए मैं आपको बार बार वादा करता हूं, मोदी के लिए आपके हित सर्वोपरि है। मेरी सरकार लघु उद्यमियों का, किसानों का, पशुपालकों का कभी भी अहित नहीं होने देंगी। दबाव कितना ही क्यों ना आए, हम झेलने की अपनी ताकत बढ़ाते जाएंगे।
Pranay Upadhyay joins me. Geeta Mohan, Siddharth Zarabi is live with us. Siddharth, I'm going to come to you first. So the new tariffs redraw the rules of global trade. How immediately will consumers then feel the pinch on prices?
Well, very clearly, as far as India is concerned, we are not going to feel any pinch on prices. In fact, were Russian crude oil imports to be curbed, that might impact our overall energy pricing mix. Remember, we have kept prices stable for 2 years and more now. Petrol and diesel prices have not been hiked for the general public in India. But as far as the American consumer is concerned, I think there will be some sense of an inflationary impact that is likely around the busy shopping season. What has happened, Maria, and this is very important to note, that ahead of all the tariff deadlines that have hit various countries, US importers have increased their imports from that specific country. Even in India, we have seen in the run up to the deadline and the imposition of the additional 25% tariffs that there's been a bit of an import surge. And therefore, due to higher stocking levels, price increases will not translate straight off. But almost every single American economist that I have tracked say that this will have an inflationary impact for the American consumer.
Okay, joining us also on this special broadcast is Anurag Singh, managing partner and SID Capital. He's joining me from Chicago. We have Daniel Block, senior editor, Foreign Affairs, joining me from New York City. Geeta, before I bring in the experts, where does India-US bilateral ties go from here onwards?
Well, these are very, very difficult times, Maria, for both the countries, particularly for India, because they're navigating a space they never imagined they'd have to. When Prime Minister Modi came to power, it was not President Trump, but it was President Obama, then President Obama, who was in power. And never did we think that there'd be a time when the United States of America will break all norms, all foreign policy ideas that you have on where US stands and how important India as a partner is and will remain to be for the United States of America. That has shifted. And now India has to align itself into seeing how they're going to go back to the talking table, negotiate with a president whose readout could look very different from your own. The reason why maybe a high-level meeting or a leadership level meeting will take a while, because they'd really want everything ironed out before the leaders meet, so that there's no confusion, no talking over each other or having different statements out of their offices.
But Geeta, how can New Delhi deal with a president who they made an initial assessment of being transactional, but now has decided to punish India? And he is resorting to foreign policy and important trade talks through social. So he operates that way. How can India negotiate with someone of that nature? I mean, what really is the way out of this stalemate? Where is India? How can India really navigate?
Well, there are a few things, Maria. Trump 2.0 is very different from Trump 1.0. Right. So everybody thought, many were not listening very carefully during the presidential campaigns. What he was saying, they only stuck to the fact that he was praising Prime Minister Modi, but forgot to hear and pay attention to the fact that he kept saying that India is tough on tariffs, I'll be tough on India should I come to power. He's walking the talk, Maria. How he's walking the talk is our problem. That we've not been able to navigate this space is because he's so unpredictable. I think there are a few things that India has done, and we'll have to wait and see how that works out for us. One is we need to get into the inner circle, the core of how Trump is thinking, the advisors who are advising Trump. Secondly, we now have a different set of lobbyists who would be working for India and lobbying for India in Washington, D.C. We'll have to see how that really works for India. And most importantly, when it comes to engagement, the embassy at an official level, where are we at, is going to be very important. One very important thing which I was talking to you earlier about, Maria, is a few tests that India would be put to. Quad summit is one of them. India is to host the Quad. If Trump doesn't come, that's going to be a massive disaster. So is India again going to miss hosting the Quad summit in India?
I think that's a point well raised here, Geeta. Let me bring in Anurag. Anurag, in terms of what are we going to see? Are we staring at a trade war spiral, or is this just a tactical bargaining chip that won't last long?
So, Maria, we all thought that 25% tariffs are here to stay because, after all, even the countries that have done the deal have got around 20, right? And India is not a Japan or European Union to get away with a 15. So, 20 was given, 25, okay, we got 25 because we didn't open anything. But the additional 25 was always thought out to be a bargaining ploy or something to be given away with on the later stages. But the way, how silently this notice has been slipped out yesterday night, and nobody in the US media seems to be talking about it. It seems that all the back channel conversations have come to a halt. So this doesn't give me any hope that, in the near future, at least, anything is going to come out of this. And India will have to live with 50%, at least for now, right? I'm sure neither of the government is coming out with what's the transparency around it, but I'm sure the issues are more difficult from at least what it appears on the outside. But
Yes,
we can only read between the lines. Yeah.
certainly, because the negotiators were expected in New Delhi, and that plan was put on hold. So, for what appears at the moment is that there is a complete breakdown of communication between the two sides. So Daniel, what do you think will hurt more in the short term? Is it the politics of tariffs or the economics on the ground?
I think it depends on who we're talking about hurting. In the United States, what we've seen so far is that Trump really only tends to back off from his tariff promises when there's massive market reactions or when there's some other clear economic penalty that comes forward. And the markets have been pretty muted about this. Now, I do expect, as people were saying earlier, that we will see prices rise in the United States as a result of the tariffs. We're already seeing that start to happen. I think the question is, does inflation get to a level where it starts to become a problem politically for Trump? And we don't know yet.
Okay, so in terms of, we don't know, there are a number of questions we don't know the answer of. How should we then be looking at what does the government of India know about, Pranay? That perhaps, because there was an important meeting which happened at the Prime Minister's office as well today.
Indeed, Maria, a lot of things are already happening in the government because we could see it coming. Because President Donald Trump, his administration, the kind of noises we could hear from the Trump administration, people like Peter Navarro or Howard Lutnick or Scott Bessent, these are the clear indications that there is no improvement, there is no movement forward. But there are certain things where India has already been pushed against the wall. See the trajectory of these bilateral negotiations and how things deteriorated. India was one of the early starters of having a trade negotiation with the Trump administration. We took it as a positive gesture. Before going to United States, Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his government announced certain measures, certain tax relaxations in the budget for year 2025-26, and therein the certain relaxations have already been given to the products where US has its own interest. And then Prime Minister travels to Washington D.C. Both leaders announced the negotiations for the bilateral trade agreement, and a deadline has been set to fall of 2025. After that, 45 rounds of virtual negotiations and 5 rounds of physical negotiations went. India has already given large number of concession to United States, but there comes a point where there are red lines for India, and India only wanted, the Trump administration, and giving the context of India-US bilateral relationship, India-US strategic partnership, that US should respect those things because they are not only politically sensitive for the Modi government, they are economically sensitive for government of India. And now we could see after the bracketing of, a very classic and a good example here, Maria, that India is bracketed with Brazil. We all know that why India is being, put or levied the additional 25%. But do you know why Brazil is being put for this 50% tariffs? The reason is not purchase of a Russian oil or any commodity from Russia, Ukraine. The reason is political. because President Donald Trump thinks that Jair Bolsonaro is wrongly being prosecuted in Brazil, and he also thinks that Brazil government is giving too many complaints to Twitter, and this is unfair on the part of the Brazilian government, and that's why Brazil should face 50% tariffs. So this clearly is the reason that there is no reasonability, there is no rationality here, and President Donald Trump thinks that it's either my way or highway. If you don't concede, if you don't come to him, then you have to face the consequences.
Yes, and here in India, Prime Minister Modi has also drawn that red line that for him, the interest of the farmers and the interest of the consumers is paramount. So, Siddharth, is there a possibility of some kind of tit for tat or retaliation which may come from India? Because India's response so far has been extremely measured. And it has been largely through those press releases that came from the External Affairs Ministry, that India puts its sovereignty first, its autonomy first.
Maria, before I answer that question, let's also inform our viewers and take note of the fact that there has been an acknowledgement and an announcement both by the US State Department and the Ministry of External Affairs, at least for the first time of official communication after trade ties have spiraled, of the 2+2 intersessional dialogue, from which there were some news reports which said that the jet engine deal, a long pending one, long negotiated one, has come through. So what does that tell us? It tells us that there is still some level of discussion, collaboration, and talks underway. As far as the trade talks are concerned, let's be very clear about it. The reason that we are now facing 50% tariffs, and actually if you do a case-by-case, item-by-item analysis, is actually much more, because it adds to the previous tallies that had come in from Trump 1, and he's already threatening pharma tariffs as well. So it's a mug's game to talk about percentages. But please understand one point that I want to bring to our audience and to all those who are here on the panel. The West has imposed umpteen number of sanctions on Russia. They have seized close to $350 billion of Russian treasury money that was parked in Western banks. All possible imaginable curbs on business have happened. More than 1,200 Western companies have quit the Russian economy. Anything that could be done to coerce Russia to abandon its war of aggression in Ukraine has been done. Yet that war has not been ended. Are we to believe that purchasing the $700,000, $800,000 or $1 million barrels of Russian oil is going to convince Mr. Putin, if that were to be barred, the Indian purchases, to stop the war? Is this American logic? I've heard the American vice president say this, people from the State Department, one of his closest advisors, talk. I mean, if there was anything that falls in the realm of, a fantasy novel, these are those comments. You have put all your power in trying to bring Russia to kneel. Nothing has happened. And then you turn to nobody else but India and say, oh, you are financing the Russian war. You are responsible for this.
Yes.
This is utter madness. I have no other polite way of describing it. It is utter madness. And what do you think the common man on the Indian street will believe? I think more than the government, which has been very measured, Maria, you made that point, tit for tat. I think the people are seeing through the absurdity of the situation.
Yes.
I think we should commend the government of India, all our officials, that we are thankfully not responding for tit for tat with that level of absurdity.
Absolutely. I mean, great degree of maturity which has been displayed by the establishment here. Yes, Geeta, you wanted to come in.
Yes, I just want to come in. Bear with me, Daniel, Pranay and Anurag. But Siddharth, to you, the intersessional meeting that you're saying, are you giving it a positive tone, or is it just transactional that America is till the time you're buying it? This is a $1 billion deal that India is buying from the United States of America. Will make Trump very happy. But is this not Trump appeasement? Because the earlier deal for a
I don't think it is appeasement.
For the engines, hear me out, Siddharth, for the engines is yet to be delivered. And we've gone ahead and signed the next one.
Fair point. Let me give my point of view. My point of view is that Prime Minister Modi's statement in Ahmedabad a short statement which we have already played out and has played out everywhere else, makes India's negotiating stance very clear.
Yes.
What is the Prime Minister saying? And there is nobody above him to talk about this. The Prime Minister is saying certain sectors, dairy, farmers, particularly small farmers, and a couple of other associated areas, including our small and medium entrepreneurs, they are no-go areas. That is a red line. We will not succumb on that. There can be no concessions on that. For everything else, we have been negotiating for 7 months. What more do you expect India to do? Lie over, bend over? That's not going to happen.
Yes.
It's
No,
simply absurd.
I'm talking about the other way around, Siddharth, that this, in all probability, look at the timing of it. That
Yes.
this is
No,
this,
no,
this
no, no,
is
let me
transactional
just-
America, purely.
No,
I'm
no,
not
let
saying
me
that we should not put our foot down. We should.
No,
But this,
let me complete the point.
Yes.
Let me complete the point, Geeta. On the issue of whether this represents a certain thaw or not, I would say it represents maturity, particularly on the Indian side and different arms of government in the United States.
Absolutely.
The American experts here can agree. I don't think the American establishment is speaking with one voice.
Yes.
Our
only
negotiators
on that I'll
went.
agree.
Yes. I will take that
Maria,
question.
just one quick point.
Go
Maria,
ahead.
just
Go
one
ahead,
quick
Siddharth.
point.
Go ahead.
Our negotiators went into meetings fully prepared, came back with notes.
Yes.
They caught a few hours of sleep. Next day morning, they see a tweet and a Truth Social post which has swung the balance completely some other way.
Yes.
How do you negotiate?
Yes. How do you negotiate
Exactly.
with someone like that? So let's try and understand what happens to companies there, functioning there. Anurag, for companies, does this mean reworking contracts overnight or waiting to see how long these tariffs last?
So, Maria, okay, a lot has been said. Let me just react to that as well. But very quick take on the companies. Look, most of the trade from India to US are largely small players. There's no bigger player involved here, right? And that's the problem in the whole thing, that, you know, these gems and jewelry guys, these agri commodity, you know, these apparel guys, they do not have the wherewithal to forget lobbying with the US government. They can't even lobby well with the Indian government, right? I think that is part of the problem here, that they have been the kind of the casualty of this whole fight, that, okay, what all we can let go. India thought, well, let's save the market, but let go of whatever limited that they are doing, right? So that's it's a conscious call. India took a call that, okay, we'll lose some bit of this 85 billion. Okay, maybe about 30, 40 billion is seriously at risk. But let's absorb this, but not open the rest of the economy. Let me now quickly address some of the points that other members made. Look, I've been repeatedly coming on different channels raising this point. I think Indian government needs to be a little more transparent with its own audience. We have all understood the red lines. I don't understand the green lines so far. What sectors were they willing to open completely? Harley Davidson was at 150% tariffs. After so much of heckling, India reduces that to 70%. Like, that's not a open market. Tesla sells in Mumbai. It was launched with much fanfare. 70% to 100% tariffs on Tesla. That's not an open market. Let's first acknowledge this. Where will India retaliate? The tariffs are all at 150% already. They are prohibitive. India imports only what it wants to import. The engines that will go into Tejas, you can't tariff them. You need them, right? The medical equipments that your hospitals use, you don't tariff them. You need them. So the point is, let's acknowledge first that Indian economy is a closed economy. Having pushed, and look, by the way, I'm saying this with a very patriotic fervor, right? But let's acknowledge the facts. And this was a moment where India was pushed to a corner. What can you open? And India says, sorry, let me close even the couple of windows that were open. So we have chosen the path to protect and close down even further. There's no shying away from this,
Okay.
right?
Anurag,
Name a sector.
Siddharth will perhaps respond to that, but before that, let's listen in to what Jeffrey Sachs told Rajdeep Sardesai earlier today.
So as the tariff war now threatens to explode, I'm joined by a very special guest. Joining me from New York is one of the world's leading economists and public policy analysts, Professor Jeffrey Sachs joins me from New York. Appreciate your joining us, Professor Sachs. You've been a clear critic of Donald Trump's tariff policies. You've described them in the past as stupid, bizarre, economically reckless, and self-destructive of US foreign policy interests. Despite that, as we've seen, the Trump administration has decided to go ahead with 50% tariffs on Indian goods, including a 25% tariff tied to India's Russian oil purchases. Do you believe that Donald Trump has simply lost it, or is he arm twisting India?
Well, he's trying to arm twist India, but he's not going to succeed. What he is succeeding in doing is uniting the BRICS countries, bringing India closer to Russia, to China, to Brazil, to other major economies in the world. He is isolating the United States from the world economy because, after all, these tariffs are making the US industry less competitive. Maybe they'll produce more for the home market, but they'll be less competitive internationally. And what countries like India and China and Russia will find out is that the fast-growing majority of the world economy is not the United States or even Europe. It is the emerging economies around the world. So I think Trump is shooting, I won't say himself in the foot, he's shooting America in the foot, my country. He's making it less prosperous and less competitive. But he is effectively uniting the rest of the world in closer relations.
The fact is, despite all the criticism of his tariff policies, he's unrelenting. In fact, his trade advisor, Mr. Navarro, says India is the Maharaja of tariffs, accuses India of profiteering from cheap Russian oil purchases. So Trump isn't backing down. That has perplexed a few people who thought that he would pull back as he had with China. With India, he seems to be going all the way.
I don't think Trump understands very much about what he does, and I don't think that the advisors understand much about India. Clearly, Mr. Navarro does not. And they thought that they could bully India, which is absurd. For the United States to think that it could bully a great power with 1.5 billion people. I could have told them no, but as I told many friends in India, don't trust the United States either. The US is not after a special relationship with India. The United States is short-sighted, poorly led, unstable, and not the basis for India's long-term development.
Okay, let me take that question to Daniel. You know, the point that was being made by Professor Sachs here was about America's credibility and the credibility of the present president. Then does this not weaken America's credibility as a champion of free trade?
I mean, the short and simple answer is yes, it does. And there are many reasons why trade negotiations with Trump are so difficult. The first is the personality of the president himself. He's somebody who clearly changes his mind often, thinks one thing one day, another thing the next day. The other is that the tariffs are designed to accomplish multiple goals, many of which are mutually incompatible. So they're designed in part to be a source of revenue for the United States government, which would require making them in some sense permanent. But they're also designed in some cases to try and get more favorable trade deals from other countries, which would require them not being permanent. And then sometimes they're designed or aimed at other political goals. So for example, as we know, in the case of India and trying to choke off or lessen Russia's oil revenue. So you mix this all together and it's very hard to negotiate. It's very hard to come to deals with Trump in particular. And yes, I mean, for the world's one-time leading advocate of free trade to say we're not doing free trade anymore, obviously that's incredibly damaging to the United States' reputation as a champion of free trade. Yes.
Yes, absolutely. And Siddharth, you wanted to come in particularly with regards to what the point that was being made by Anurag. Please go ahead.
Well, Anurag, I follow him on Twitter. He's very smart in his observations. But unfortunately, when you look at the United States and India, you must take into account not just the goods trade, but services trade.
Yes.
And if you look at the total transactions, goods, services, defense purchases, education, I mean, it's actually 80 to 85 billion dollars. The United States actually earns a massive $40 billion surplus from India. So there are trade-offs. You can't have it all your way. All digital companies from the United States count India as one of their largest subscriber markets. ChatGPT is the latest example. Go into other social media. They have zero access in China. China does not allow them to even set foot in the Chinese mainland. You earn billions of dollars here, and then you complain about Tesla. We have, over the last 3 decades, with great painstaking effort, Indian entrepreneurs and foreign capital. India's largest car maker is owned by Japan. So don't call us a closed economy just because a dozen Tesla cars might be sold or a Harley Davidson. That's not the right way to look at our openness. Our openness also has to take into account 1.5 billion people, half of whom barely live at subsistence levels. Don't impose Nordic or Western standards on us, because you don't do that. The whole world, the Western world, did not bother about carbon till they became developed economies. And now when it comes to India, you say, oh, carbon? Did you do that with China? There is complete hypocrisy, double standards, triple standards, call it what you may. And I'm glad that the United States is actually showing to most Indians how unreliable it is as an ally.
And
Does
what
that
is
mean we
becoming
should?
clear also, Siddharth, here is that there are realignments which are happening. The Asian economies are turning further towards, CPTPP and RCEP, so there is this sense that things could change dramatically too. We'll be joined by a new set of guests, but yes, Professor Andrew Latham joins us. He's a distinguished scholar of international security and strategic studies. We also have Dipanshu Mohan, Professor and Dean of OP Jindal Global University. Dipanshu, coming to you, India is the fastest growing major economy. There is, the fact here is, it's almost like a global investor magnet. And now we are facing a situation of this nature where a great degree of uncertainty is also, looming large. But at the same time, are you sensing that this tariff, which actually kicks in, will be also passing on cost to consumers, or will there be some kind of renegotiations of suppliers?
Okay, thank you for having me here. So I don't think any impact of what we are seeing right now may happen on prices within the Indian market at this point of time. There are certain suppliers, particularly in the textiles and apparel sector. And what you would expect is maybe within, of course, gems, diamond, jewelry. The main segment of India's exports to the US in goods, that is IT and pharma, has been uncovered and untouched by the tariffs. And I think that is where one would have to see how the Trump administration goes ahead with treating India in terms of its extension of what they would consider as secondary sanctions, if they want to scope the tariffs out to IT and pharma. That would really affect us big time on the goods segment. I think the main challenge we face is clearly on services, because that's where we export a lot of our segment in the US. Where I think a lot of the conversation is less, I think, discussed is on the capital account side. We have a lot of investment that is pledged into the Indian markets from the US investors. And we must be aware that a lot of the domestic private investment in India across sectors hasn't grown the way the government would have anticipated. And I think we have been too reliant on foreign direct investment. A lot of that has not been adding up. And the US is a big investment market for us. And a lot of the portfolio investment also, as you see, is being driven away. So the volatility in the international market should drive us to do a lot more on the domestic spectrum, is something that I would probably say for a large domestic economy like ours, the size is not of just interest to the external actors, but it is also of a greater interest to our own domestic growth needs. And I think we have to really put a lot of effort in rationalizing the kind of factor market reforms that perhaps we should now target. Because the real issue here Maria, is about relevance. You can realign with Asian markets, you can realign with Southeast Asian markets, but how relevant you are and how competitive you are is ultimately going to decide how your integration with trade happens. It's a very ruthless calculus, for us to work with. So I think our competitiveness to go up requires a reimagination of our industrial policy. It needs to be a greater focus on middle-income consumers. I've seen a huge squeezing out of middle-income classes, not just within India, but you're seeing that across now in many middle-income markets. So Brazil is a middle-income market. South Africa is a middle-income market. China doesn't allow us the kind of access to markets that we look at. Russia, we have already a very maxed out defense and energy lead tie. So if you're really looking for new markets, it would have to be parts of Africa, again, low middle income. You'll have to look at then parts of Southeast Asia. China is the dominant player there. So how do you stay relevant? You have to do something drastic in your domestic market.
Okay, so when we look at drastic measures, perhaps Siddharth will be able to explain that. But before I go to Siddharth, Professor Latham, this is effectively weaponizing trade. Making tariffs part of geopolitical coercion is the new policy of Trump administration. That's how most analysts and economists are seeing this.
Well, I wouldn't disagree with that. I think Donald Trump gets one thing right. He understands that the post-World War II, post-Cold War Bretton Woods system, rules-based international order, is falling apart. And as in 1945 and as in 1991, he thinks that the United States ought to step up and re-engineer that global order. Unfortunately, his vision is a hub-and-spoke arrangement with the United States always at the center, involved in very favorable bilateral trade relations with India, with China, with Japan, with Canada, with Mexico, et cetera. And there's some logic to that, but it's dysfunctional. It's counterproductive because it's alienating America's good friends and allies, not only in geoeconomic terms, reciprocal tariff barriers and non-tariff barriers and things like that, but also in geopolitical terms. The friendship between India and the United States, which had been growing and which leaders on both sides had been building for the last 20, 25 years, is now, if not in danger, certainly going through a period of turbulence. And we see India rationally pursuing its own national interest, gravitating a little bit more towards Russia in certain respects, mending some fences and rebuilding some bridges with China to some extent, and moving away from the United States, not radically, but in a way that clearly signals that this is a counterproductive kind of approach geopolitically. So I think Trump gets it sort of right. You're right. The language of weaponization, I think, is correct. That resonates with me. He's correct that the old order is dead and the new one is struggling to be born. And as Antonio Gramsci once reminded us, that is a time of monsters.
Okay.
And this is a time of monsters.
Yes, and Geeta, the announcement and this kicking in of the new tariffs is coming just few days ahead of that crucial SCO summit, where Prime Minister Modi will be face-to-face with Vladimir Putin and also with Xi Jinping.
Well, that's right. Like most of our experts over here have been saying that all these tariffs and the coercive tactics of Trump administration, Maria, is doing is pushing India to that bloc, the Russia, India, China bloc. We are seeing a revival of RIC like no other. And again, we'll have to wait and see how the meetings pan out in SCO, but this is going to be a very important visit. He's going to Japan, a country, again, that's having a very difficult time with the United States of America, and then going to China, a country that India is meaning to engage even when we have difficulties at the border. Despite that, there is going to be engagement. There is forward movement that the two countries are going to look at and maybe look at a workable and solution to the problems that the two countries have faced. Also, Maria, despite and in spite of all the problems that India and China have had, China has remained one of India's largest trading partners. So that does not go away either. So this is an opportunity for India and China to come together and see how they can best utilize this opportunity to further their interests, regional interests and country interests.
So
And also
basically
the other
reset
yes,
is what we are
absolutely.
looking at. And do you think it can happen at the SCO given the nature of that summit?
Certainly, because apart from the SCO summit level meetings, there will be enough time for bilaterals, and apart from Pakistan, expect bilaterals between Prime Minister Modi and most other leaders who are going to be there. The crucial ones would be, should there be one, because there are no confirmations or announcements, the crucial ones would be India-China and India-Russia. So these are the two important meetings that we'll be waiting to see, and the outcome of India-China is going to be very important for India and for China, because all the NSA level talks, the foreign minister level meetings, all of them have taken place already. Now we have to see whether they worked it out between themselves to ensure that there's some crucial announcement when the leaders meet, should they meet.
Yes, so Pranay, of course, there has been lots that has happened before this SCO summit. There have been visits by Dr. S. Jaishankar to Moscow. There has been a visit by the Chinese foreign minister to India. So all that, keeping in mind all those developments, what do you think can be the nature of the outcomes if the bilaterals happen between India, China, India, Russia?
Maria, a lot was stuck during, during COVID time and post-COVID and Galwan incident, because Prime Minister Narendra Modi would be in China after 7 years. Last he visited,
yes.
Pre-COVID in Wuhan was the informal summit between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Xi Jinping. And after that, Prime Minister would be traveling to China. This is also itself, though he's going for a multilateral thing, but see the trajectory. He's pursuing that look east policy. The possibility lies there. Japan is a very significant and important visit in this, in this tour of Prime Minister Modi, because as far as the apparel sector is concerned, India is trying to align and India is trying to explore the Japanese market. Japan is a big importer of apparel, though their rules are a bit strict, though their standards are very high. But Indian exporters are now trying to work out with that, and they have been working. And we have Uniqlo and many other Miniso and all many other Japanese brands are there in Indian market, and Indian exporters are now trying to align their products as per the Japanese standards. And a lot of things are also expected from the Prime Minister's Japan visit in terms of the defense, in terms of the bilateral trade, and the East Asia partnership between both these countries. But when Prime Minister travels to Shanghai Cooperation Organization, you have to see that when India became member of SCO in 2017, thereafter, right, India has actively engaged with SCO at various platforms where trade, business, economic cooperation remains an important aspect of it, but terrorism is also an important part, an important component of India's SCO negotiation, India's SCO contributions there. And that's the regional anti-terror mechanism is a platform where India has always raised the problem of terrorism. So we have to see that, how all these things, because in SCO, when Pakistan is also there, when other countries are also there, when China is also there, and how Prime Minister raises that issue, we have to be mindful about these things. We cannot say that just because in reaction of our difficult relationship with the United States, we are totally drifting away towards China towards this.
But do you think then, Siddharth, that India, China, India, Russia will be looking at more points of convergences at this point, given the geopolitical tensions and realignment that we are witnessing?
Where is the option? You saw what happened during Sindoor. Old, tried and tested Russian armaments served us well, including the S-400, may I remind everyone. China, look at our supply side relationship with them. Look at their dominance in sector upon sector, including raw earth minerals or fertilizers, for that example. That's how the trade order, at the urging of the Western nations, primarily the United States, started to develop from the late 80s. Now today, for the US to try and switch it off in one go, that's not going to happen. I just want to bring one more point, Maria, about the absurdity of the US position. And, as a reporter, I would want to stick to facts, but allow me some opinion here. The USTR report a few months ago on foreign trade barriers had a chapter on all countries, including India. I'll just give you two examples of how disconnected from reality is the US and its trade establishment with regard to Indian realities. They say that the MSP is a distorting mechanism and make critical remarks on it. Can you imagine that if the minimum support price regime were to be altered under US pressure, what would be the consequences? I will give only one more example before I hand it back to you. They have a problem with the fact that stents, India, which has one of the highest disease burdens when it comes to obesity, diabetes, and consequently heart attacks, that price caps on stents are not good. Till we didn't have that, stents used to be very expensive. Look at the per capita income in India. What does a government do? Will it not have price caps on stents? Can it allow the price gouging that US companies are known for, the US healthcare system is known for? And now President Trump, literally 24 hours ago, has said that he's going to bring down drug prices in the United States by 1,400, 1,500%. I don't know whether those numbers add up. I'm just trying to, quote him verbatim. On the other hand, he's also saying that many outsiders have taken advantage of our pharma market, so we'll put price caps there also and tariffs. The US president himself is talking about how the US healthcare system has a very negative impact on costs. Yet you are critical of India trying to ensure that stents are available at a reasonable cost. It is, I can go on and on through that report, which will tell the average viewer of how impossible the American demands are. The fact that India engaged for 7 months and has kept its stations is a tribute. And I think Indian negotiators should actually get the Nobel Prize for peace in negotiation.
That's actually very well put here, Siddharth. You know, as I've been using that word, it has been extremely measured, great degree of caution that has been exercised by India, despite repeated provocation that has been coming in from the United States and right from the top, right from President Donald Trump himself, who went on to say that Indian economy is a dead economy. I'm going to come to Dipanshu and Professor Latham in just a bit. But before that, let's listen in to what Navtej Sarna, former Indian ambassador to the United States, told Rajdeep Sardesai earlier today.
Navtej Sarna, there's the challenge diplomatically. You've got all that feel-good factor, up ki baar, Trump Sarkar, howdy Modi, all of that seems now way in the past. Do you believe that this relationship is now floundering at the moment, a 25-year-old relationship in which a number of people have invested? Is there a serious trust deficit, or is this a temporary blip in your view?
Thank you, Rajdeep. You're absolutely right that the feel-good factor is significantly missing today. And you rightly said that 25 years we've seen an upward graph of this relationship, no matter. And that's been a bipartisan thing, both in India and in the United States. Unfortunately, I think what has happened over the last few months has damaged the relationship, most importantly on the trust front. And all the skeptics who always said that you can't trust the US, you can't, tie your troth to the US and all that, I think they have been proved correct. So I think even if tomorrow Donald Trump was to suddenly take off the 50% and say, I love India and all that sort of thing, I think it will be very difficult for any rational partner, and we are rational partners, to go back to, business as usual. I think trust will take a long time to rebuild, and we haven't even begun.
It's interesting you're saying that trust will take a long time to rebuild. You might have heard Professor Jeffrey Sachs saying this is an opportunity for us to build a stronger trade relationship with China, to have a look east policy. Now, you've had a huge trust deficit with the Chinese as well. Do you share that view that this is an opportune time to try and strengthen our trade relations with China? The Prime Minister going to Shanghai to China next week, along with President Putin also there. We'll have a new kind of alliance with BRICS is strengthened. Do you go along with that?
Like in human relationships, so also in relationships between countries, one should not go on the rebound. Because if you go simply on the rebound, then you are losing track of your basic interests. So I'm sure that, while we would like to improve relations with China, we cannot lose sight of our fundamental differences with China. So while we are at the moment creating some diplomatic space, we are not going to sort of suddenly become lovey-dovey with China and say, okay, we'll act together against the United States. We still must remember, most recently, we've seen China's operational action on Operation Sindoor along with Pakistan. China remains, our disengagement, our de-escalation has not really been finished. And they're building the most huge hydroelectric project, which is going to, without taking care of the interests of the lower riparian state, that is India. So I think fundamental differences will remain. Whether we can bracket them off and start some amount of normalcy, say, like we are trying to in getting some critical equipment, in getting urea, in getting rare earth magnets, and so on for our industry. Let's see how far that goes. At the moment, it's very initial stages. It's simply talking about direct flights and border checkpoints opening for trade. So let's see how it goes. But I don't think, simply because we're having problems with China, we don't want to go with such a weak negotiating hand to the Chinese.
And let me go back to Professor Latham and Dipanshu Mohan and give them the last word on the special broadcast. Professor Latham, your thoughts. How is this going to pan out in the next few weeks? Do you think there will be a reset? And how tough will that reset be?
I think we always have to look in foreign policy and international relations. We look at not at personalities and not at feelings, but at interests. Where do the various parties' interests lie? Right now, India's interests lie in calming the waters with China, but not with aligning with China. I remind your viewers that since 2017, India has played a spoiler role within the SCO, opposing de-dollarization, opposing the condemnation of Israel, et cetera, et cetera. It has not been on Team China and not been on Team Russia. It has pursued its own national interests, and it will do so again. And I think in the medium to long term, what we're going through now is not a burning of bridges, but a damaging of bridges. And those bridges can be repaired between the US and India. And I think they will be because the deep, profound geopolitical interests of India and the United States align. And those between India and Russia sort of align sometimes. And those between India and China rarely align.
Okay, so who will play the peacemaker here, Dipanshu Mohan?
Well, I would just say that emotions and nostalgia should not be taken as part of strategy. The time right now is of great volatility and uncertainty. You are going to see this for the next at least 2 to 3 years. US is, with the Trump administration, shooting itself in its foot. There is no doubt that it is seeing what was last seen in the US in the 1970s, an effect of inflation and also a recession. And the US economy clearly will struggle, which will have ramifications all over the globe. We are still linked to the dollar markets. As much as we want to de-dollarize, all of this would take time. But I think one of the critical factors right now is this is clearly India's moment to undertake some serious structural internal reforms, make our industries more competitive. And if we don't do that, our resilience will make ourselves to become more vulnerable to not be able to negotiate in multilateral agreements. My concern right now is that we don't have a lot of leverage. See, Trump acted exactly the same way with China. He came very hard on China. China came back at the Trump administration. The issue is that their imports into the US market are very inelastic. There are not many substitutes. And Trump can afford to take a hardened stand and may continue doing so till just order to ensure more submissiveness. So we are right to exercise restraint, to ensure balance, try restarting relationships with our neighbors. But we are also at a position that we are not having a lot to do in our international markets, whether in South Asia and Southeast Asia. And that to me is concerning.
All right, Dipanshu, really appreciate your time. Professor Latham, Siddharth Zarabi, Geeta and Pranay, thank you for joining us on this special broadcast. Of course, the new tariffs kick in at 9:30 a.m. Indian Standard Time, which is 12:01 EST. And we'll continue to track this story very, very closely with ground reports also from the sectors which have been impacted the most. Stay with us.